Good morning, everybody. It's Andrew Vigar from Terra Uranium. I'm the executive chairman and one of the founders. The company was listed on the ASX on code T92 in September last year, and we're an active explorer in the Athabasca Basin in eastern Athabasca in Canada.
Andrew, good to have you on the show. First time we've spoken, and first time we've obviously had the story on, relatively new as well. So, Athabasca Basin, how did you pick the assets up?
It's been a long story, and I've been in the uranium industry for about 15 years now, and this is the second company we've put together. We were really focused on potential producing assets that had low costs. So this was prior to the boom in the price about 18 months ago, but we really had a target of $20 US or less. And there's only really two types of deposits that can do that. That's the roll front shallow ISR type deposits, such as Kazakhstan or some of the ones in Australia, or the very, very high grade deposits. And the ones that have grades sort of over 10% uranium, not 1%, but 10%. The only types of deposits that you find those in the world is in the Athabasca in Canada. So that's been on there.
So that's why the Athabasca Basin. But how did you actually find these assets? Because a lot of competition out there. So where did you pick them up from?
Yeah, there is an enormous amount of opposition. So we put the company together with a very high powered team. We always choose the best people, and they have to be Matthew. They have to be people local. So although our company is ASX, all our operational team is based in Saskatoon, in Saskatchewan. Try saying that quickly after you've had a couple of beers. But it's a great part of the world. It's right up there, I think, number 3 on the Fraser Index. Very friendly for mining. They're very supportive. You have potash, you have base metals, as well as uranium, and a large agricultural industry. So it's a very, very friendly environment. So we went in there and we started with Mike McClelland, who's our President Canada, and looks after the operations there. He's locally born and bred, ex-Cameco, ex-BHP, knows the basin back to front. And we basically said, Mike, now that you're coming on board with us, where would you go and look? And he said straight away, Cable Bay Shear Zone. So that's where we pegged our ground. We actually acquired the ground ourselves, so we pegged it. It was vacant. And it really goes back to the last cycle. So you're aware of super cycles of metals. There was a super cycle in the 80s and 90s in uranium. That ended with the collapse of the USSR and the weapons grade stuff coming onto the market, killed the price. But there was a lot of activity in this area. It's a well-known structure, but it's a little bit further west and a little bit deeper than the known major deposit.
Okay, well, let's talk about that, Andrew, because I'm trying to work out, because there's going to be lots of there have been, and there will be more entrants coming into the market, jumping on the bandwagon, as it were. So I'm trying to distinguish you from the others, and I think the clue there was the fact you're going after some of this deeper lying ore bodies. So tell us exactly what you're trying to do.
Yeah, well, we tweaked pretty quickly that if you want to find a major deposit, it's probably going to be undercover. And therefore you need the best exploration techniques and methods available. And we very quickly got on to using airborne geophysics, basically, as well as gravity. And then we brought a new technique out from Australia called ANT, ambient noise tomography, which is passive seismic. Worked extremely well in Australia, under the sands in South Australia. And we thought sandstone, should work the same. We were the first ones to use it on a trial basis, worked brilliantly. So we were able to actually map the unconformity at 800 to 900 meters of depth. And the unconformity at the base of the sandstone, that's where we find the mega deposits. That's where we get the 20-30% ones.
Okay, well, with the ANT, obviously I think we've talked on the show many times about VTEM and ZTEM, but
yes,
but the
that's been around.
That's been around a bit, right? So and obviously been at the geophysics, etc. too. But so the ANT. Where has it worked for uranium previously in terms of, I know it's worked with sands in Oz, but
yes.
Has anyone else in the Athabasca used it?
We were the first. We were the ones who brought it in from Australia. And that came from my association with my Australian uranium company. And we're very, very successful there. And we thought, well, our number one priority, Matthew, is to map that unconformity. because these high-grade deposits, the ones we're looking for, are at the unconformity or just above it in the sandstone. And when you're down that deep, we need to know where that unconformity is, exactly, and the shape and texture of it. And we trialled the ANT. As I said, the first time it ever been used, worked brilliantly. We think we're not only seeing the unconformity position itself, but we're also seeing alteration and some variations in that unconformity, which support Z10, which is obviously our main method. It's the tried and proven one. V10, which works very well but has limited depth potential. And we're also doing some geochemistry at shallow depths in the sandstone, looking for traces of uranium, and that's working well as well, because we have glacial cover. So we have between 10 and 50 metres of glacial cover. You've got to get through that. So we've done some shallow work there too. But it's putting all those things together. And for instance, the technical team under Mike are using supercomputers in the cloud that they build in the cloud these days rather than physically to be able to process this data. We've got Professor Tom Kotzer from University of Ottawa, the world-recognised specialist in geochemistry. We've got Kyle Patterson, who's second-generation geophysicist. Absolutely top-notch team. We always go for the best people.
Absolutely, always. We will start there. But so just so I can get a better sense of how you're piecing all this together again, you because it's like, companies come on here and they talk about, oh, we've got some anomalies, we've got some targets, and it doesn't really mean anything until you kind of get the drill bit in there. So
yes.
with regards to checking your hypothesis and the data that you're using so far, what gives you most confidence pre-drilling, and then obviously I guess you're starting a process of getting into drilling. So can you just give me some of those levels of confidence and where they come from?
Well, there were signs of mineralization. First of all, structure. Everything's based on structure. Sorry, I'm a geologist, so I tend to get very excited about this stuff. But everything's based on structure. You've got to have fluid pathways, and they've got to be big, and they've got to have a lot of power behind them. So we go for this big structural zone. Next, we need conductors, which is where the Z10 comes in. The conductors are usually carbon. So there's carbonaceous material in these fault zones. The reason we want carbon is it's a reductant. It changes the chemistry of the fluids. It causes the metals to drop out, particularly uranium. So we look for conductors. Doesn't mean you have uranium, but it means it's another step in the process. So you have the structures, then you have the conductors. We look for signs of uranium at surface. We can do that. The ANT has been a good one because we look for variations in the surface as well. But then you have to diamond drill. And for a company that was only listed 6 months ago, Matthew, we've now got a diamond rig on site, mobilised, ready to go to drill a 1,000-metre drill hole. Our IPO, we only had one drill hole. That's all we could budget for, because all the data we were working with was 20 to 30 years old. So we said, rightio, it looks great, but is it real? So let's go and refly it with new Z10. Let's fly it with new geophysics. Let's repeat the geochem. If they all repeat and they all come up looking great, then we'll do the diamond drilling. Because you're right, without the diamond drilling, you don't have a discovery.
Right, but you're also at depth. That suggests cost here.
Yes.
And obviously 10 million Aussie company out of the gate. You're going to need to put a decent sized budget together. So what are you planning for this year in terms of number of, and put any way you want to measure it, in terms of meters to be drilled or depths to be drilled? How many holes are we talking about?
We'd really like to drill. We have three main target areas. We have Hook Rock in the north, Passfield, which is our biggest one, and original one in the centre. Really interesting area, some really interesting structures going on there because there's some sort of a basement uplift or a meteor impact or something going on in there, but it's really mucked things around. And then Parker, which is a classic eastern Athabasca conductor type zone right on the Cable Bay in the south. Parker just keeps getting better and better, and that's where the rig's sitting at the moment, ready to start. Passfield is very large anomaly and really interesting. We'll probably drill that one next. We'd like to drill 4 or 5 holes this year.
Okay.
I think that's reasonable. We're we're a startup, so it's very hard. I'd love to have 2 or 3 rigs going, around the clock, but we just can't afford that. So we're being
absolutely, and therein lies the challenge for all juniors is try the best use and allocation of capital, best return on capital invested, being in this where you are now. The drill bit's going to deliver that. So one drill on site, Parker, then Passfield, and then I guess Hawk Rock at some point, right? But you've got to say, well, what's the smart use of money? So why Parker Lake first? What are you expecting that to do for you? You're going with in order priority of likelihood of success?
It was. At Passfield, when we listed 6 months ago, was our number one priority. But there was some really intriguing stuff going on at Parker, but the data was very old. So now that we've flown the ZTEM and now we've done ground geophysics, which will be coming out next week, I can't talk about it because it's not released yet, but keep an eye out for it. It's very interesting.
Right.
It just keeps on getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And it's a classic Athabasca style linear conductor with some nice breaks in it.
Right.
And you've got to remember, Matthew, these are our own projects. So we peg these from scratch. We own these 100%. There's no joint venture partners, there's no royalties, there's no clawbacks, there's no anything. So we're very much focused on finding a major discovery, and then once we find that, then we'll work with a major company or some other group to bring that into production. It's not our intention to be a producer. We're a discovery.
You're a discovery, right? So it's a kind of relatively financially unencumbered set of assets that you've got, which is good. You're not giving away any future upside as well with royalties, etc. But at the same time, you're going to need to fund this drilling, and you're going to be clear with the market about what you believe success looks like. Because again, it's coming off a back of difficult sort of 18 months where the market's kind of moved depending on what Sput is doing, or what
bit choppy,
very choppy, what term contracts have been signed, etc. So and then price sits in or around $50, which is great compared to 2 years ago, early 30s. But you need the market to move to do some heavy lifting for you, but you're also going to have to stay in control of what you're in control of, and that is putting information out into market and says, not just here's who we are, we're explorers and we're going for the big stuff deep down, but this is what success looks like and this is what we want to spend money on. So, who wants to give me some money, right? Because it's expensive stuff, deep drilling.
It is. And that's why we put an awful lot of care and effort into targeting of those drill holes, so that it's a structured approach, very, very clearly structured. And we're at step number 5 or 6 now. It's not just going out wildcatting. It's very, very structured, and we're using every tool available to make sure that we target the very, very best spot. Obviously, I could say when, but let's hope that we have a discovery. When a discovery occurs, then our whole capitalisation of our company and the structure changes. But as I said earlier, we're in a very strong position corporately because we own that asset. So we're not generating wealth for somebody else. We're generating wealth for our shareholders. And then we're in a position, people say, well, Andrew, what are you going to do when you have a discovery? And we say, well, we'll do what's the best for our shareholders. So that might be a joint venture. We might talk to one of the majors like Orano or Cameco, who are both neighbours, or ISO Energy, who's another neighbour, to say, look, you joint venture in on our ground. And we'll just sit there and you can spend the money and we'll get the uplift in value. Or we might decide that we want to do it ourselves. That's a board decision.
Okay.
But the main thing is the options are open. We're not stuck on a narrow path.
Right. Okay. You're talking game of doing things the right way. So help me with some terminology, because we've had companies come on here with one drill hole and go, we've made a discovery, which is it's hard to understand how that can be. Do you think it's different in uranium? Can you make a discovery with one drill hole, or is there more to it than that?
Well, you can. I mean, I've done it with other companies we've been in, and we had success with the first hole. But I should point out it's extremely rare. It often takes several. Success for us would be to show that there is mineralization and alteration at the unconformity, and that we've got a mineralized system, even if we haven't hit the center of it. These ore bodies are very small. You can imagine if something's running 20, 30% uranium, it can fit in, the size of a suburban housing block. They're quite small. But the system is much larger. So you'll have good indications. You'll have alteration. You'll have trace elements. You'll have a reasonable amount of uranium and radioactivity in the system, but you also have all alteration systems going with it. So that to us would be success in the first hole.
Right, and what sort of depths are we talking about?
They're around 800-900 meters to the M conformity.
Okay.
A lot of people, and it's a really good question, have said, well, if these areas are so prospective, why haven't people looked here before? And the answer was pretty simple. Everybody said 800-900 meters, you can't mine it. It's too deep. But what the boys at Denison are doing with their Phoenix work, that's a real game changer for us, because they've put their first full field trial in. They've showed that ore bodies of this type, these are the ones running 20-30%, can be mined with in situ recovery. In other words, mined with a drill. And that's just whether you're mining that at 400 or 500 meters or 800 meters makes almost no difference. And from their field trial, this is a full production scale field trial. Their all-in sustaining cost was, you probably know the number, Matthew, but I'll remind you, $9.80 US a pound. That's a very, very low cost, and very, very low environmental impact, because you only have a well field. There's no actual mine as such. It's
interesting, yeah, because just again for people who perhaps new to this, typically we've said the Kazatomprom and similar would be under $25 bucks, and that's a good day at the office. So under 10 is spectacular, high margin, which is what you want from all mining companies. Okay, so tell us about the rest of this year. Obviously, going to get a drill program going, step back, see what you've got. And then make some decisions. What's your view of what's happening in the market at the moment? Because as I say, it has been fairly choppy. We've seen obviously the Russia situation causing all sorts of mayhem with regards to enriched uranium and contracting across the world. So how do you see yourself fitting into this? You're an explorer, but how do you see yourself fitting into that narrative that's out there?
Well, I could give you an example, because we very much chose the eastern Athabasca, because if we make a discovery, there are 3 mills within 100 kilometres of us, and it's fine having production, but you've got to be able to treat it. And as you know, uranium's a very odd mineral because it has several steps in the treatment process to produce nuclear fuel for a power station. And we've had discussions with some of the majors. We were at the PDAC recently. And there was a lot of discussion amongst those majors, basically saying the whole process of producing uranium for fuel rods and things actually works back to front. So electricity company will say we require fuel for our reactors. Then they go to the converter, who goes to the refiner, who then goes to the miner, which is all the opposite direction to what normally happens. And what we're seeing with all the changes in Central Europe is there's just an absolute shortage of uranium. And we had several of the majors come up to us at PDAC and say, look, Andrew, if you guys find something, we'll take it. We can see a huge shortage in 5 to 10 years' time in physical uranium. We just don't know where it's going to come from. The nuclear industry itself is coming back strongly. Japan is talking about building new reactors. The French are refreshing their fleet. The US is starting to build new reactors. Where's the uranium coming from? It's not coming from Central Europe, or Central Asia, sorry, because China has an enormous demand for uranium. They'll be taking everything they can get out of Kazakhstan
and possibly Africa, as they currently or they have done.
And Africa, very much. They're very active in Africa. So where's it going to come from? It's going to come from Australia. It's going to come from Canada and North America, we call it. Canada with that little country just to the south,
the noisy neighbours. Right,
yeah.
Well, it's nice to see more entrants coming in, but it's especially nice to see quality teams coming, into the space. I mean, it might be worth, and so I'd enjoy. I'm saying you mentioned that you have obviously been around the block with uranium before and previously had a company. Can you give us a bit on your background specifically, please, before we go?
Yeah, sure. I'm a Broken Hill boy, so I was born in Broken Hill, which is BHP, obviously, the birthplace of BHP. It's in the blood. I'm a geologist. I've worked for BHP, CRA, SRK Consulting with a long stint, and various other companies, and really enjoyed being in the business. And when this opportunity came along, we just sort of jumped at it. But I've been involved in other things: copper, gold, nickel, various commodities. But we try to focus on one thing at a time, Matthew, and build, as I build around the team. Mike McClelland is ex-Cameco, ex-BHP. Troy Risoli, who's also on our board, was the guy who did Arrow for ISO. He was 5 years there. Prior to that, he was in production with Cameco. Doug Engdale's also on our board. A terrific guy who runs Axiom, the major contracting group out of Saskatoon as well. And Dr. Kylie Prendergast, who's a world-recognised explorationist. Just a terrific bunch of people.
Fun to work with, and it helps that they know what they're doing. So, Angie, I'll wrap it up there. Thank you very much for coming on the channel, introducing this uranium story to our subscribers and followers. We will stay in touch and see how you get on.
Yeah, and it's just starting, Matthew. The uranium story is only just starting. I'll ask you, just finish with one note for your viewers. The cost of producing electricity with nuclear power, a fraction of 1% is the uranium. There's all the other stuff. So the price is not driven by, unlike coal or something else. The price, who knows what the price will be. I'm very bullish.